welcome to the Knitted by Whitney YouTube channel. I am back with another pattern roundup video. And if the subject of this pattern roundup video seems a little familiar, it's because this is my third time doing my top 20 size inclusive patterns for using your Advent mini skeins. I have found another bunch of patterns to share with you that you can use Advent mini skeins for. Now, I've already done 2 videos featuring garment patterns that you can make using your standard 24 skein Advent calendar mini set. And for this video, I wanted to think outside the box a little bit because the Advent calendar that I got this year doesn't feature 24 mini skeins that you open each day leading up to Christmas. And I know some yarny friends that also got Advent calendars that are not the standard 24 skein set. This year, I purchased an Advent calendar from Teeny Button Studios based out of New Orleans in Louisiana in the States. And hers was not your typical 24-day Advent. It was a 5-week Sunday evening Advent calendar leading up to New Year's Eve. Now, it is New Year's Eve today, the day of recording. I'm not sure when this video will come out. I would like it to come out tomorrow on New Year's Day, but these videos can take a bit of editing time, so I might not get it out on the 1st of January like I intend. That's okay. It doesn't have to go out that day. So I have now opened all of my mini skeins that came in my Advent calendar. And I was showing them off in my Vlogmas episodes, but of course you didn't get to see all of them because the last 2 that I opened, the last half mini skein and then the full skein that you opened at the end, happened after Vlogmas was over. So I'm going to share with you those last 2 Advent minis that I didn't get to open during Vlogmas, and then I'm going to get into the pattern roundup list. Now, whenever I show one of the patterns, I'm going to mention whether it is fingering weight or if it's DK and you have to hold your fingering minis together, and various other info about what kind of a mini set would work with that pattern, etc., etc. I really hope you enjoyed the list that I've put together. I think I found some really interesting patterns and found creative ways that you can use your minis irregardless of if you have a 24 mini set or not. So if you didn't join me for Vlogmas this year, that's totally okay. I'm going to show off all of the minis that I opened in my Advent calendar so you can see all 4 of them plus the full skein at the end together. Now, just a reminder, the theme of this Advent calendar was in the stacks, and here is the little card that came with it. And as I'm showing the minis, I'm going to have a photo here of what the inspiration photo was like for this Advent calendar. Now, before I show you the Advent minis, I wanted to talk about what this type of Advent calendar was like. Unlike a typical Advent calendar that has 20-gram minis, this Advent calendar had 4 50-gram minis and then 1 100-gram skein. So you had 4 half skeins of yarn to open and then 1 full skein at the end. And I chose the soft sock base. So altogether, I have quite a bit of yardage that I could actually use to make a sweater, which is what I'm thinking of making with this yarn, but I haven't yet decided what I'm going to make with it because I wanted to let the yarn tell me what it wanted to be made into. I didn't want to pick a pattern and then make the yarn fit into that, simply because I didn't know what it was going to look like until I opened it. So the first mini that I opened was this one, which is called End Papers. And this one is mainly a beige with some darker beige, some yellow, and some pops of burgundy. So that's number 1. Number 2 is Book Plate. This gorgeous sage green with pops of rusty orange and navy. This one was actually one of my favorites in the entire set. And I just love how those colors play together. The third one was Dust Jacket. And this one was this gorgeous chocolate brown with all of these hints of other colors. I particularly love the little pops of bluish green. And of course, lots of burgundy and brown. And then the last half skein mini skein, which you haven't seen yet because I wasn't able to show it during Vlogmas, was leather bound. And this is beautiful. It's like this plummy brown color that features flecks of beige and navy and little bits of gold. I just think this is absolutely stunning. So the 4 minis together came in this order. And they just look so beautiful together. And the last full skein that I opened doesn't have a colorway name to it. I think it's just meant to be In the Stacks, which is the name of the whole advent calendar. And it's this beautiful skein. And there are so many colors on this skein of yarn. And it really does pull together all of the minis. Let's see if I can put them here. It's hard to hold them all together at this point. But here are all of the yarns in this advent calendar. So when I purchased it from Robin, who runs Teeny Button Studios, she did mention that all of the colors would complement each other and go well together. But I don't quite know how I want to use these colors together. They don't necessarily work as a straight fade, and they are kind of all over the place, which is why I'm not sure if I want to do striping. I might want to do a pattern that uses some mohair and bring in a cohesive mohair that would tie everything together. Maybe a dark brown, maybe a burgundy. I haven't yet decided, but I do think that they are absolutely beautiful. I'm pretty sure I want to make a sweater with these simply because I have enough yardage to do that. But it might be fun to just kind of hang on to them to do projects individually, like keep the colors separate rather than together. But I haven't decided yet, but I have lots of time to decide. Now, over the years, I have done a couple advents and I have collected a lot of mini skeins. And although I have plans for some of them, I don't have plans for all of them, which is kind of what prompted me to come up with my pattern roundup list the first time I did a list of advent patterns. And as I came up with those first 2 sets of advent calendar patterns, I kind of stuck to patterns that used the full 24 set, and I didn't really look for anything very creative or inventive that was something that you would have to play around a bit more with color. It was pretty much, here's a pattern that uses a lot of different colors. It's either a fade or it's striped or it has some sort of a colorwork pattern where you have to use all kinds of colors, go wild, that kind of thing. And this time around, I kind of wanted to find patterns that were a little bit different or that might not use as many advent minis, because I actually have some yarny friends who didn't get full 24 set minis. They got a 12 set, or like me, they did the 4 half skeins and then the full skein. So it's not really 24 separate colors. So that's kind of what prompted me to do this new set of advent mini patterns, and I'm really excited about what I found. So let's dive into those patterns now. You also may have noticed that I'm using my Knitted by Whitney mug. I love this mug. I need to have some tea nearby because I'm going to be doing a lot of talking in this video. Now, based on my first pattern that I'm going to be talking about, you might be wondering why I'm not wearing it. Because it's the Lento Sweater. How many of you are surprised that I included this pattern in another pattern roundup list? I adore this pattern. It's one of my favorite patterns that I've ever knitted, and I wanted to share this one as an advent mini skein option because that's exactly what I used to knit mine, and I had so much fun with it, and it was so much easier than I thought it was going to be, and I wanted to share my experiences of making it with you in case you wanted to try to do the same thing. So this is a pattern that would be great if you have a 12 skein mini set. And that's if you're knitting one of the medium to larger sizes like I was. So this pattern uses a strand of mohair held with a strand of fingering weight yarn. And when I made this, I had some beautiful mohair that I wanted to use. I had some Hedgehog Fibers Kid Silk, and I loved the color so much, and I couldn't really find anything in my stash that was a full skein that I wanted to use with that yarn because I wanted to make the mohair shine. until I spotted my box of minis, which was a little more full at that time because I had just finished opening my Woolshed advent calendar for the year, which is where this box comes from. It's got a couple of sets of advent calendars in it now, but at the time I had just the Woolshed set, and I was surprised at how many of the colors matched my mohair. So I ended up doing a fade. The actual advent calendar for the Woolshed was Enchanted Forest was the theme, and it went from, I think it was like a pale pinky purple all the way to a dark green. I'll pop a picture here of what the full advent calendar looked like, but there was a lot of pinky purples in it, and they happened to blend really nicely together, and they matched very well with my Hedgehog Fibers Kid Silk. So I ended up creating my own fade from within that advent calendar, and I ended up using, I think it was 10 skeins, 10 mini skeins, but I didn't finish the 10th one because I was only using that for the end of the sleeves. I didn't need it for the body anymore, so I technically only used about 9.5, and I knit size 5, I'm pretty sure. I go into detail about this in my Lento Sweater podcast episode, which I'll link below if you're interested in watching that. So even though it's a bit of work to do the math to do the Lento Sweater with some mini skeins, I highly recommend it, and I really believe it's worth the work because that is one of my most worn sweaters. Actually, if you watched my most recent video, which was Can You Guess My Most Worn Sweater of 2023, the Lento topped the list. And I absolutely love it. I wear it all the time. It's one of my favorite pieces in my handmade wardrobe. It was well worth it, so I highly recommend this pattern. Now, if you like the idea of the Lento, but you would prefer a cardigan version, the next pattern that I would recommend to you is the Fluffy Poof by Beta Jezik of Hedgehog Fibers. Now, Beta is a whiz with color, and I hope I pronounced her name correctly. I'm not actually sure how to pronounce it. Hedgehog Fibers are known for having lots of wild and crazy colored yarns, and she just keeps coming up with patterns to use all of those yarns with, and they look so cohesive. I'm a really big fan of them. Plus, all of her patterns are free, and her garment patterns are size inclusive, which is so lovely to see, especially when it comes to free patterns. A lot of free patterns are not size inclusive, but I really love the Fluffy Poof. It's her newest one in the Poof collection. So I'm all for this new one that's added to the list, and I think it's great for minis because you're holding a strand of fingering and a strand of mohair in this pattern. Now this one could work with a couple different advent calendar types, and the main reason that I included it is because if you got Through the Wardrobe Yarn Co.'s advent calendar this year, this is a really good pattern for that because Selena's advent calendar, although it was a 24 mini skein set, 12 of those minis were fingering weight yarn and 12 of them were Surrey. And this is a pattern where you hold one strand of fingering weight the same throughout and you change your mohair as you go through. So I think this would be a great pattern if you got Selena's advent calendar and you needed to find a pattern that uses changing colors of mohair yarn, or in her case, Surrey. My next pattern on this list, Cardi by Anna Daku, is the last of the fade patterns that I'm going to share with you today. I've divided the patterns that I found into like little groupings, and the first one was patterns that you fade your minis. So this is the last one that will feature a fade, with the exception of one other one that's going to come up later, but I'll talk about that one later. And this one is your basic 2 strands of fingering held together to create a DK weight. And Anna created this pattern for you to use your scraps. Now, the main reason I wanted to include this pattern is because this is a good pattern for people like me that have gotten a few advent calendars over the year and you don't quite know what to do with them, and you now have a box full of minis. This pattern is really great because it's a yarn guzzler. So let's say you want to do some stash busting in 2024. That's one of your knitting goals for this year. This would be a great pattern to really put a dent in that box of minis, or if you have scrap yarns that are hanging around and you just want to use up as much yarn as possible and just get it out of the stash. Now, something else that I love about this pattern is that it's designed to be a comfort project. Because the body of the cardigan, which is knit flat, is all in garter stitch, which means you're knitting every single row. But then when you get to the sleeves, which are knit in the round, they're stockinette. So you're still knitting every stitch as a knit stitch. You're not doing any purling at all. So if you're somebody that doesn't want to take on purling in your projects, you're not a fan of it, or you just want something that is going to be very meditative, very relaxing, this would be a great option. Now we're going to move on into some striping patterns, starting with Helianthus by Andrea Gauguin, I hope I pronounced correctly, or Andrea Gauguin. I do apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly. This is a very fun striped tank top. And the reason that I love this one is because if you look at the number of stripes, it corresponds to a 12 skein advent calendar. This is also a great project if you live somewhere where you don't want a big, cozy advent project. You want something that's going to work for warmer temperatures. Now, I was thinking about a specific yarny friend when I put this project on my list, because this is a great project if you have a 12 skein mini calendar and you live somewhere warm and you don't necessarily want a big cozy cardigan or a long sleeve pullover. You want something that works for warm weather. I adore this little tank top pattern. I think it's really fun. I think it's really fresh, and I feel like it would be a staple to your wardrobe. So if you know me well, you're going to think I'm crazy because this is a bottom-up tank top pattern, and I've included it for a reason, and it's the same reason that I've included another bottom-up pattern a little later on in this list of patterns. And the reason that I've included this is because if you're using mini skeins and you want to maximize the use of your mini skeins, you're starting at the bottom where you're going to be making your widest stripes. And by widest, I mean you're going to be using yarn for the widest part of the tank top. So you'll know how much of your mini skein that you can use to make a stripe. So I haven't done a deep dive into this pattern, but I do know that you can get away with doing 12 different mini skeins in this pattern because there's 12 stripes, but those last few stripes are very small compared to the bottom of the tank top where you're doing the full body circumference. When you get to the top, you only have a little bit. So let's say you use full minis for those stripes at the bottom. By the time that you get to the top, you don't have to worry about making sure you have enough yarn to do your bind off, to do your seaming or anything like that. You already know you're in the clear because you've done the main parts of the tank top that need the most amount of yarn already. You're into the easy breezy zone up here. These are short rows. These don't take very long to do. And you don't have to worry about making sure you have enough yarn left over to do your bind off at the very bottom, because that's already done for you. The next pattern on my list is Pretty Boxes Sweater by Corey Eichelberger. I hope I pronounced correctly. This is another great pattern if you live in a warmer climate or if you want your mini skein project to be nice to wear throughout the year, not just at cold time, because it's a t-shirt sweater. Now this one is super cute because not only are you going to be able to use your mini skeins, you could also pull in some yarns that you have in stash that are full skeins, which is something that I'm thinking about with my advent calendar that I got this year. I have one full skein and then 4 half skeins, so I'm looking at something that I might be able to use that whole set for. This might be a good option for me. However, the pattern also has a full sleeve length option for this as well. So if you want a full version of this, you don't want a t-shirt version, you could do that too. But what I like about this one is that not only are you using the minis in that initial circular yoke colorwork section, you're also adding little hints of it throughout the rest of the top, such as the bind off on the sleeves and on the hem of the top. I think it's really cute. It's a nice detail that is just a little something extra added to it. And I think it really brings the whole piece together. You're not just shoving all your minis here, then moving on to working with solid yarn for the rest of the piece. I think it adds a little more fun and excitement for when you're knitting it. Okay, I lied earlier when I said that the first 3 patterns were the only fade options that I had and that we'd moved into striping. We're kind of in like a mixed bag of a section right here where it's both striping and it's warm weather pieces. So my next pattern is a faded pattern for warm weather. It is the Color Burst Tee by Nona Davenport. And I'll tell you right away, the number one thing I love about this pattern, that photo right there. I love that it shows this pattern on so many different body types. I was actually talking with somebody either on Instagram or YouTube recently where they said that they struggle to find photos of sweaters on somebody with their body type. That's why I love patterns like this, because not only is it size inclusive, it's showing you that it's size inclusive by showing multiple body types wearing that pattern so you can see how it looks on a variety of body types. I also love this pattern because it's a different style of construction. This is a side-to-side construction, and I think it's a really fun way to use your minis, especially if you're not into a horizontal striping. Maybe that's just not your vibe for what you like, but something like this is kind of like a sunburst going across your top, and I think it's really fun. This is also a great option if your advent calendar wasn't wool, because this is a top that's designed using cotton yarn, and I know there's some fabulous cotton yarn dyers out there, so this would be a great option if you have one of those. Now, continuing in this sideways knit construction featuring striping is the next pattern, which is the Confectionary Cardigan by Margaret. This one is one that I think needs a little bit of a caveat because it does feature a wide range of sizes, but it only has 3 sizes. So this is an open style cardigan that has size 1, 2, and 3 because it is meant to be an oversized cardigan. Now you may be thinking that doesn't make it size inclusive. And to be fair, yes, that could be true. However, the reason that I feel that this deserves a place on my list is because of the way it is constructed. You're starting at the middle of the cardigan and knitting outwards in both directions, flat, and then you pick up and knit your sleeves from that armhole that you have created when you seamed. Now, I don't know for sure what size the sleeves are because I haven't bought the pattern. I haven't really delved deep into it. However, I feel that you could customize your armhole by deciding how far up you want to seam the sides of your cardigan. So my recommendation, if you choose to knit this sweater, would be that once you've knit your body, put it on, try it on, and use little stitch holders to mark where you want your underarm to start. And then when you go to pick up your sleeves, disregard what the pattern says and just pick up and knit your sleeves, because I don't think these sleeves have any shaping to them. I think they're just knit straight. Now, I love this look as a piece to put over you because this is very similar to the chiffon style kimonos that I wear in the summertime, and I love that look. It's something that really fits with my personal style, which is why I love this as a knitted option. And I'm really curious to knit this myself, so I actually might buy this pattern and knit this myself. I just haven't decided yet. Now, my next pattern on this list is for when you have a small mini skein set, maybe a 12 skein set, maybe even less than that, that are so punchy, but they don't fit with what you normally wear and you don't know how to use them. This is the After Sweater by Christy Glass. And this one is the chaotic version of 2 patterns that I'm going to share with you. This one uses bobbles for your mini skeins. Now, it is a DK weight pattern, so you would have to hold your minis double, but I feel like this would be so fun. I love the styling of this pattern. I think it's super fun, and I really feel like it speaks to a fun set of colors in a mini skein set, and it allows you to sort of add that pop of color with a color that you more normally wear, such as a neutral. Now, the pattern example shows a bright highlighter yellow sweater with all kinds of bright like pink and white pops of bobbles, but I feel like you could also tone it down if you wanted to use a beige, a brown, even like a gray would be nice with all kinds of rainbow colored bobbles. How fun would that be? And I also love that it brings the color back by adding it to the cuffs of the sweater. I think that's a really nice detail, and I really feel like it would punch up a neutral color while allowing you to wear some brightly colored minis that you otherwise wouldn't know what to do with because they don't fit your normal style. But if the after sweater is a little too chaotic for you, you want something that's more methodical, more planned, more straightforward, I recommend the Bobble Buster by Stephanie Earp. I hope I pronounced that correctly. This is the same idea. You have a neutral colored base and then you have multicolored baubles going across the sweater. But this one is in concentric circles, so it looks more planned out. It's less of a one detail right up by your neck. It's more spread throughout the whole sweater. I think this one is just as nice as the after sweater. It's just for a different style knitter who likes a different style in their wardrobe. And I think this is another great way to use up those minis that you otherwise wouldn't know what to do with. Or even if you just have some scraps of your minis left over, like I do, this whole box of randoms, it's kind of nice to have a way of pulling all of those together and using them in one cohesive project. Now this next one is a fun pattern, and I've included it because I watched the designer develop it on her YouTube channel. This is the Moan Cardigan by Engineering Knits. And this one is super fun. I watched her develop this in her videos on YouTube because she was copying a vintage sweater that she already had, but she wanted a modern knit one so that she could preserve the vintage one because she wore it so often. And I love that this is a vintage inspired size inclusive sweater because let me tell you, it is hard to find vintage style patterns in a size inclusive range. Now this one is really fun and I feel like it's one that you could really enjoy picking your color scheme ahead of time. I don't know if she has like a schematic that you can like color in or if you just have to like look at the picture and decide how many colors you're going to do. Now, Engineering Knits knit the original pattern sample, which you see in the photo here, following the color scheme of the vintage sweater that she had already that she really loved because she wanted it to just look the same. But then she did a second version, which I'm going to show now, that features different colors. And I love her second version because it's all autumnal colors. Now, based on watching Engineering Knits' video about making this sweater, you will have a lot of ends to weave in if you choose to change colors every one of those sets of circles, because that's why she chose to fade her autumnal color version rather than do gold, orange, purple, gold, orange, purple. She chose to do all gold, all orange, all purple because she was carrying her yarns up the side. She didn't want to weave in a bunch of ends. But if you don't mind weaving in ends, you could definitely do a version where you change colors every single round of circles, and I think that would be super cute, especially if you did it in a rainbow. How beautiful would that be? Speaking of rainbows, my next pattern on this list is the Minimalist Rainbow by Yulina Murak. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I do apologize if I didn't. This is another great option if you only got a 12 skein mini set or you only have some scraps left over from your minis and you want to find a way to use them and you have a corresponding solid color that you could use. Now, I could have chosen almost any striped sweater for this type of pattern, but the reason I chose this one is because I love the detailing on it. There's some really beautiful lines going down the shoulder area of the sweater as well as the hem and the sleeves. It's not your typical ribbing of 1x1 or 2x2. It really plays around with your ribbing and I think it's really cute. It's a really nice detail that I haven't seen in another pattern. This pattern also gives you the option of doing the turtleneck version or crew neck version, and the pockets are also optional. You don't need to add those if you're not into them. But if the Minimalist Rainbow is just not using enough of your minis, you want something that uses more, I recommend the Scrappy Stripes sweater by Mary Gannon. This one is a really nice classic crew neck striped sweater. And I love that it was designed specifically using mini skeins and scraps to allow you to use them to their full potential. Now this one does do a subtle fade of a rainbow, but you could do any colors that you want and I feel like it would still look just as fun and it would be a great piece in your wardrobe that would be very unique. Nobody else would have anything like it. You just need to have a corresponding color as your main color throughout to keep that same style of striping. Or you could go crazy wild and change stripes every single time and not have one corresponding color be your background color. And now for a pattern I'm sure you're probably not at all surprised that I've included on this list. It's actually the pattern that gave me the idea to do a new set of Advent patterns. It is the Daap Days cardigan by Rebecca Clow of the Crea Bea. I am a huge fan of Rebecca's patterns. She is a fully size-inclusive knitwear designer, and she has been since she started. She makes size inclusivity a priority, and she was very thoughtful when she designed this cardigan, and I'm going to explain to you why. So when I was talking about the Helianthus tank top earlier on, I said that it was bottom up and that there was another pattern on my list that was also bottom up, and I chose it for a reason. This is that other bottom up pattern, and this is why I chose this pattern. Like with Engineering Knits' pattern, I watched Rebecca develop her Daap Days cardigan through her podcast episodes, and I've listened to her talk about how she chose how to design it, why she chose to make it bottom up, and all of that. Because I don't really like bottom up sweater patterns, but for someone like Rebecca, I trust her to make a very well designed bottom up sweater. And I love that she designed it bottom up so that you can get a full understanding of how much of your yarn it takes to knit a stripe, and it allows you to plan out your stripes. So when Rebecca did this pattern, she chose I think it was a 14-day skein advent calendar, or 15. She got the Sadvent by Nervous Fibers, which she put out last January, which was from the 1st of January until the 15th of January, which was Blue Monday. I don't know what date Blue Monday is this year, but it's typically the 3rd Monday in January, 2nd Monday in January. I'm not quite sure. But this is an advent calendar that she put out then to allow people to have something exciting to look forward to in January, especially if they didn't get a normal advent for December. This was another option for them to get. And I love that Rebecca designed this pattern from the bottom up so that you could use as much of your mini skeins as you had on hand and allow you to sort of swap colors if need be if you were running out of a color. So she started it from the bottom up because those are going to be the biggest stripes that you're going to use, and that will use the most of your mini skein. So this is a pattern that she recommends using a scale while you're knitting it so that you know how much of your mini skein you've used to knit one stripe, and that will allow you to plan out your stripes for the rest of the sweater. When she knit this, I think she used her first color 4 times. She did twice on the body and I think twice on each sleeve, and she only had a few little grams left. So I think if you go to knit this pattern and you're a larger size than Rebecca, I think she knit size 3. I'm not quite sure. It would be a good idea to sort of trade up which mini skeins you start the sleeves with so that you can have all of your mini skeins used to their full potential. But that's why I love this pattern, and I think it's really, really fun. The next pattern is a really fun one, and it's one that I've purchased, and I have plans to knit this one, but I don't quite know how I'm going to do it yet. It is the Twist Cardigan by Amba O'Brien. Now, Amba is a designer who loves advents, and she creates an advent calendar pattern every single year. I think it started with her Radvent cardigan that she released maybe 5 or 6 years ago, but the Twist Cardigan was the 2023 advent pattern that she developed, and I adore this pattern. I love it because it uses unique construction. It's a totally different way of doing striping. You're doing this beautiful deep V on the back of your sweater, and it just looks really fun and exciting. Now, this is one where you could do either striping or fading. I have taken a look at my pattern. It's quite a large document, so I haven't dug quite into it yet. But I love that this is going to be a fun option for me to use a variety of colors together. I do love the original version that does I think it's 12 stripes down the back, but she also has a longer version that she knit because there's 3 different length versions. There's the short length, which is the one that I like. There is a thigh length, and I think there's a knee length. So I've included photos of both the original short length and the knee length one because the knee length version shows fading a 24 skein mini set all the way down and then using, I think it's 1 or 2 skeins of a solid color just to do the top of the cardigan, the very bottom to fill out those spots of the triangles, and then the sleeves and of course the ribbed collar. So this is one that you could either use a 12 skein or a 24 skein and get a really cool result. Now, if you want a striped sweater that's just a little outside your typical striped sweater, the next pattern is for you. This is the Pvagwette by L'Atelier de Tricot. I probably pronounced that terribly because my French is terrible, but I did my best, and I have shown you on the screen how you spell that if you're looking for this pattern. This is a really cute one because I love the wavy stripes on this sweater. This is one that is a pretty standard striping sequence that I think is used a lot in baby blankets. I think it's the fan and feather lace style of striping, and it looks really cute, especially on the knitter who has made the rainbow version. That's the one that really caught my eye because that shows how many different colors that you could use for this. This is another pattern that would benefit from having a grounding background color that you stripe throughout all of the different mini skein colors. But I think it would also be fun to just use very different colored mini skeins. Like, let's say you have some bright mini skeins and some dark mini skeins. Maybe striping a different one for each of those wavy stripes. That would look so cute and it would be really unique. Now, this next pattern on my list, I think is the newest pattern released out of all of the ones on my list, and it is Voyage by Wool & Pine, and I think it just came out last month. This is one that is going to be super fun to make, especially if, like me, you have a box of minis that you don't know what to do with and you want to find a way to use them all. This is a really fun colorwork sweater pattern that still grounds it with a bit of neutral as well. What I like about this sweater pattern is most crazy, wild, colorful patterns are pullover sweaters because they're meant to look kind of like crazy Christmas sweaters. This one is a cardigan version, and I really feel like it's grounded compared to one of those pullovers. I feel like this one could fit better into your wardrobe by playing around with color and grounding it with a neutral. Most of the drama is in the back of the cardigan where you see the whole back. The front is just going to have a little bit of that color because you're going to have that really wide shawl collar that's going to be neutral and your sleeves are going to be neutral. So I feel like this is a nice one if you want to play around with a bit of color. Maybe you only have a 12 skein advent calendar and you want to create something that you can wear that's not quite as dramatic as if you just used all of your advents together with no neutral to ground them. Now, let's say you're somebody who doesn't like to be held down by one particular pattern motif. You want to play around with what your sweater looks like, change it halfway through, change it every so often. You just want to have something that's totally creative and really allows you to do what makes you happy. The partner pullover is for you. This is by Lydia Morrow of What Lydia Made, and this is one that you could have total creative freedom with. I've seen so many different versions of this sweater, and I really feel like it encourages you to play around with color, play around with shapes, play around with patterns. Every time I see a new one pop up, it's just as stunning as the last one that I saw, and it's totally different because everybody has a different interpretation of what they want their version to look like because there's different pattern motifs, and everybody uses different colors. Now you could do what the blue and neon sample did, which is just hold two colors together, or you could do the green ribbing sample that's in the photo, which is where you just have all kinds of different colors. And this is one that I think would be really fun to just use a variety of minis for. Now this is a good pattern option for people like me that have this big box of minis staring at them, wondering what you're going to make with it. I know a lot of folks that have purchased this pattern in anticipation of using their Advent minis for it, and that is the Arloom Quilt pattern by Katrin Seeberger. I definitely want to make this pattern myself as well. I'm just a little intimidated by the amount of seaming because I don't like seaming, but I do think this is a great pattern for minis, and it also allows you to really work through your stash and work through some scrap yarns that you have. And it's a really portable project because you're only knitting one square at a time. You don't have to hold this entire oversized cardigan on your lap while attaching different squares to it and picking up and knitting more squares. You really get to have one little project you're working on and then at the end put everything together to create the big cardigan. Now this is one that I also think benefits from a bit of planning. I also love that this pattern really allows you to continue building off of what you've done. So the pattern sample shows it as a cropped style, but it would be nothing to add more of those quilt squares to the bottom and make this an even longer cardigan. Now my second to last pattern is one that would be quite an endeavor, but I think it would be well worth it. It is the Stripe Hype dress by Veronica Lindberg of Pvagwette. Now this is one that I think would just be super cool for just throwing on and heading out and doing errands. It's definitely one of those pieces that I think would have a great place in your wardrobe for something that is just an easy wear but can also be a statement piece. Now the pattern sample shows a repeated stripe sequence, but it would be nothing to sub in different minis for all of those and just create this head to toe wild and crazy striped dress pattern. And since it's a dress, you don't have to worry about matching it with anything else in your wardrobe because that's the whole outfit. You just throw on the dress and go. I know I've seen a few versions of this that are just basically total cool girl vibes, and I really feel like if you pick the right colors for your mini set, you could make something that is totally unique and really, really fun. Now, if cool girl chic isn't your particular style, you're more art teacher on the weekend vibe, then my last pattern on my list is for you. This is the Bog Standard Paneled Skirt by Elizabeth Lovick, and I think this is so cool. I think Elizabeth is probably one of the coolest people ever. I wish I was as cool as she is because she creates some really fun and funky pieces, and she clearly doesn't care what anybody thinks. She's going to do what makes her happy, and I love that vibe. This one is also a fun piece because it ranges from child sizes all the way up to adult sizes, and the length is fully customizable. You start with your waistband and then you knit panels and you seam them together. So you can make your panels as long or as short as you want, and you could really create either the long midi skirt style that's seen in the pattern sample, or you could create a really fun little mini skirt or anything in between. But what I love the most about this is that you could really do whatever color you want. I love that Elizabeth has done this with a neon set of yarns, and I really feel like that speaks to a lot of the advent calendars that I'm seeing. I really feel that neons and neon pastels are really popular right now, and I feel like a lot of advent calendars were that type of color palette, and I really feel like you could have fun with this. I think it would be really, really fun. And that wraps up my list of my top 20 size-inclusive advent patterns. Now, I hope you enjoyed this third installment in this series. Time will tell if I can do it again next year, if there's going to be some more patterns that come out, or if I find other patterns that could be used for mini skeins. But I really feel like I've put together some really fun creative ones this time, and so I really hope that you liked this collection as well. Like I mentioned throughout the video, some of these patterns work well for some non-typical Advent mini skein sets. So if you got an Advent calendar that wasn't the typical 24 skeins, you got something that was either a 12 skein mini set, or maybe like me, you got 4 half skeins and a full skein. I hope something in this list spoke to you that you might want to make yourself. If you're new here, thank you so much for joining me, and if you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for coming back. I really appreciate it. While you're here, give this video a like and subscribe to my channel, and if you want to be notified for when my new videos come out, hit that bell icon down below. If you got some minis this year, I hope you found something to knit from this pattern list, and if you don't have any minis but you know someone who did, pass this video along to them and see if they find something they might like. So now that I've shared this list of patterns, it's time for me to figure out what I'm going to make with the mini skeins that I got this year, as well as the others that are sitting in this box staring at me. But I hope you all take care and happy knitting!